Hello and welcome back to Afterglow episode 89, and in our habit of doing games completely out of order, we're going to be covering today's Sonic and Knuckles for the Sega Genesis. I'm covering this one first because, strangely enough, I had this game before I had Sonic 3. I had rented Sonic 3 one time. Every other time, it was like out of stock. I don't know if someone rented it and just decided to keep it, but they never got Sonic 3 back. But I want to say a year or two afterwards, I had a buddy that wanted to trade off Sonic and Knuckles. So I ended up with a copy of Sonic and Knuckles before I ended up with a copy of Sonic 3. Well, which is fine because, even separately, they're both really good games. Obviously, that's meant to be played together, and I get that. But on this show, I will be reviewing those two games separately. Another kind of interesting thing I've noticed as I've been doing this show, it seems like I played a lot more NES, Super Nintendo, and PlayStation 1 than I did Sega Genesis, even though I had the Genesis before I had the Super Nintendo, which is kind of weird. I don't know if that shows maybe some favoritism on my part or not. I try not to have favoritism because when it comes to the whole 16-bit war thing, I really liked both systems equally, which is really, kind of weird, but I did feel that the Super Nintendo had better music and better graphics, but I felt the Genesis was kind of more edgy in a way, and their games made it unique. But for some reason, I always leaned towards the Super Nintendo version whenever I played ports and whatnot. And the Genesis I wanted for the exclusives, like Vector Man and Sonic the Hedgehog, Mutant League Football, and all them. But that's probably enough of me rambling. We'll listen to a little bit of music before the game before I get into my thoughts of Sonic and Knuckles. Welcome back. So like I said in the intro, I had first gotten this game by someone who was wanting to trade it off, and I was really interested. So of course, I really enjoyed Sonic the Hedgehog 2. I enjoyed Sonic 1 as well, which I had gotten on that 6-pack cartridge, which I'll be talking about later. I did talk about that in, I believe, the Streets of Rage episode. But I got it, and of course I had the lock-on thing, and I knew about it, of course, but I didn't have a way of getting Sonic 3 at the time. I did have Sonic 2, so it was cool being able to lock it on, and being able to play as Knuckles in Sonic the Hedgehog 2, which I did a couple times. I did notice that Knuckles feels like he doesn't jump as high as Sonic does, and you've got to use that climbing mechanic a bit in certain areas, where Sonic could just jump up there and get to where you're needing to go. But that's really all I wanted to cover on that, because I want to focus on Sonic and Knuckles. And the first thing that stood out to me, honestly, was the difference in the game, how, in the first level you've got the mushroom area, but it looks like it's, the middle of summer and whatnot. And then the scene kind of transitions into a winter version as you go to the second act. I loved that whole transition thing, and they do that more or less through the entire game for the most part. And even the soundtrack, whenever you go from the first to the second part of a stage, has a little bit of a difference to it whenever you're listening to it, which is a touch I really, really love. Just the fact that, it might be a similar theme, but there are enough differences in there to keep you more engaged, which I feel is a pretty big improvement from Sonic 1 and Sonic 2. Another thing I liked that you kind of see early game is the variety of special stages. There's a few different kinds here. There's a kind of like a slot machine 1, which kind of mirrors the slot machine stage in Sonic 2 in my opinion, except that it has the thing where your screen rotates like it did in the bonus stages in Sonic 1. But the idea is to get into the slot machine and get rings before you leave the stage. There's what I call the gumball machine, where there's these big orbs, and you're trying to fling yourself up the stage in order to get these power-ups. There's another one that feels like you're in a very tight tunnel, and you're trying to grab power-ups in that one too. And then finally there's the blue spheres, which is definitely the most visually appealing, where you're on like a globe and you can turn in 90-degree angles. And you have to collect all the blue orbs while avoiding red orbs. And honestly, like at first it's really cool, but I'm the type of guy, I got bored with it really quick. That is on me though, because I've heard a lot of other people that could literally just play a whole game of nothing but blue sphere. Not for me, it's a fun diversion, but I'm definitely over it before I've got all the Chaos Emeralds. Now, going to the end of the first stage, that's another thing that's visually appealing, because it turns into like an auto-scroller for the boss. You jump up to try to blow the satellite, and it ends up being Eggman. And the screen starts auto-scrolling, and there's actually a cool kind of pseudo 3D effect that they do, which is honestly just parallax scrolling, but it looks so good. Like, this first boss is incredibly impressive. But after you beat him, you move on to the second stage, which you're already on, like, the Eggman carrier thing. I felt that for being the second stage, it's really early. But that's not a bad thing. It gives this game a little bit more of that unique flavor that I really like. So the egg carrier can be a little tricky. It's got some spikes that can catch you. It's also got some flamethrowers. I do really like the boss, though, where Eggman is almost in the slingshot thing, and he's normally below the area where you can attack most of the time, but occasionally he'll sling himself up, and that's when you can catch him. But you gotta be careful, because he's also got a flamethrower at the top he can use to attack you with. Again, another kind of cool, unique boss that I really enjoyed. But they can't all be winners, and I was not a fan of the Egyptian stage. The first part actually isn't too bad, other than the mini-boss at the beginning of it, which, more or less, you gotta knock him in quicksand. He's invincible unless you knock him in quicksand, which is fine, but it just kind of felt lackluster to me. Although, to be honest, a lot of the game's mini-bosses, to me, don't really stand out, which is why I've been skipping over them a little bit. But then you get inside the pyramid, and it has a very annoying lights on, lights off mechanic, where you have to pull these handles to keep the lights on. Once the lights start dimming, these ghosts will spawn, and if it gets too dark in the stage, the ghosts will begin to attack you. That wouldn't be too bad if it weren't for the fact that the stage is also maze-like, and you have to navigate this big maze to get through it, and it just wasn't appealing to me. And even the final Eggman boss at the end of it, like, he's this big brick-looking thing, and you have to knock the bricks off to be able to get the attack on him. It felt kinda just lackluster to me. But like I said, they can't all be winners, and even the greatest Sonic games, in my opinion, do have a few stages that are just kinda meh. And for me, this is a stage that was just, that kinda meh feeling. That being said, the game makes up for it in spades with the next zone, Lava Reef. Absolute blast in this stage. The first section of it has a bunch of lava sections that you have to dodge, along with these, I don't know how to explain them. They're poles that spew smoke at you, and the smoke can hurt you. It's a little different, but I love it. And after you beat the mini-boss, which is this, like, tentacle thing, real easy to beat, but the lava ends up, like, going cold, which is such a cool touch, and now you have this big crystal cave that you're going through. And I just love that transition. It's really wild until the end of the stage, where for a chunk of it you see the death egg, which is like lodged in So the volcano that you see in the intro of the game, that's what you're in right now. So you see the engines of the Death Egg flare up real quick, and that starts your Eggman boss. And Eggman got smart for this fight, because he's got spikes on the top of his machine. You can't really jump attack him. But he reactivates the lava with that flash from the Death Egg, and he can tilt the lava left and right to bring you towards him. So you're jumping on platforms, and these platforms are hitting him. And that's what you have to do to beat him. It's more or less just outlast him. It's not hard, but just the theming of this stage is so cool. I really enjoy it. So that brings us to the journey to the Sky Sanctuary. This is a big storyline stage for sure, where Knuckles finally realizes, oh hey, Eggman maybe isn't such a good guy after all. Eggman steals the giant emerald, and you chase after him through the Sky Temple. It's falling apart. And you've got a little bit of a recurring mini-boss here with a metal version of Sonic, which is a lot of fun. And of course, this is a sky level, so there's lots of platforms you gotta watch. They're falling down, you can fall to your death really easily. But for storyline purposes, this stage is just fantastic. It carries on the story so well. It can be a tricky stage, but to me, it's actually easier than the Egyptian stage and the Lava Reef stage. It's not that bad. I love the fact that you're slowly climbing up to that Death Egg, which is really the next area that you're hitting after you defeat Metal Sonic, which the Metal Sonic fight's kind of fun too, because it's a callback to some of the earlier boss fights in the series, which I do enjoy. But that finally brings you to the Death Egg Zone, which the big gimmick for this one is a lot of gravity changing. A lot of times the gravity will kind of mess with you a little bit. You'll go on these speed things to where these rings will pop up in front of you, and you're traveling through the rings as they warp around everywhere. You don't control it, but it's a really, really cool visual. And of course, the gravity changing is neat. The mini-boss has a little bit of gravity change to it, which this is, in my opinion, one of the more unique mini-bosses, where he's firing these little miniature drones with spikes on them. And you have to change gravity to make these drones hit him with the gravity change, make him shoot up and hit him. But he's also got a shield that will rotate around him a little bit that you have to watch. And then the stage kind of falls apart a little bit, so you're like on the exterior part of the Death Egg with the, I'm gonna call it Earth, I don't know what planet it actually is, but it's in the background, and you go through the second part of the stage before you finally fight this giant Dr. Robotnik creation, a giant robot. First you have to take the fingers out, which is kind of cool. I usually speed dash between them and then just pinball myself off of him whenever he closes them. After that, the platform starts to fall away. He will lower his defensives to fire a giant laser at you, and you have to attack whenever he drops those defenses. After that point, that's where the game kind of splits. You can get the bad ending if you haven't got all the Chaos Emeralds, but if you got them all, you can get the good ending. Robotnik grabs the giant emerald and tries to escape, but if you have all the Chaos Emeralds, you can turn into Supersonic, which you've been able to do throughout the game, but it's automatic in this case. Supersonic is a mechanic to where nothing can really damage you. You move at incredibly fast speed, however, you lose 1 ring a second. If you get to 0 rings, you lose your Supersonic transformation. So the idea behind this boss is to keep collecting rings while getting hits on him. And he is throwing everything at you. There's missiles coming in from everywhere. There's asteroids coming in at you. It's really fun, but more or less the differences between the ending is that if you get the bad ending, the floating island sinks into the sea and floats on top of the sea and just becomes a regular island. And the good ending, it stays in the sky, and that's it. But that is Sonic and Knuckles, all the stages kind of taken care of, my memories of it. Overall, I really, really enjoy this game. Yeah, the Egyptian stage is kind of a downer, but every other stage in this game, I think, is really, really well done. Yeah, and I also know it's meant to be played to Sonic 3, but most of my experience with this game was separate for the longest time. But this game is dirt easy to get a hold of. I would recommend the Sonic Origins collection. The only difference is that for Sonic 3 and the Origins collection, there are a few music tracks that have been swapped out. I believe it's due to the whole Michael Jackson thing where he worked on Sonic 3, but they don't want to admit he worked on it, and they've ripped his tracks out. Even back then, I mean, we kind of knew with Sonic 3, just from, like, the sound effects. But, I digress. I thought he had worked on it even back then, but now there's a big controversy around it. But they took out those tracks more or less. But if you want to play this game today, that's the version to get in my opinion. You can play the entire game series front to back, including Sonic 3 and Knuckles the way everyone intended, although with my personal memories, I played Sonic and Knuckles separate from Sonic 3, so I had to do the review separate. I will eventually get to Sonic 3, but because this is a game I did play a lot first, I wanted to record this episode first. But I'm sure you guys have heard enough of me rambling for this episode. I'm gonna play just a bit more music before we roll that outro. As always, thank you for listening to another episode of Afterglow. If you're looking for more Afterglow and more friends of the show, please be sure to check out the show notes where we have a link tree. That link tree has other places you can listen to Afterglow. It's got links to our Discord. It's got links to our Patreon if you to check it out and donate a little bit. It's got links to the merch store where you can go ahead and grab the show logo on anything. Shirt, sticker, magnet, whatever. So if you want to check all that out, please be sure to check out the link tree. Also, if you're looking for more of me, I might be on another podcast soon. Myself and another gentleman who has been on the show before are discussing starting up a new podcast, which might scratch that retro itch a little bit. Not necessarily video gaming, but it's still definitely going to be leaning towards the retro side. So be on the lookout for that. Episodes of Afterglow are still going to be sporadic. I am starting a new job very soon after the move. And like I said, I'm going to try to stick to weekly. I might slip to bi-weekly for a little bit, especially with this new show coming up. That being said, Afterglow's not going anywhere. I'm going to keep making episodes for you all. Before we go to our friends of the show talking about their shows at the end of this, special shout outs to, of course, Grim from the Lost and Gone podcast for doing our intro as well as our outro music. And special shout out to TobyVonDoom from the Secret Levels podcast for doing our show logo. And as always, if you're looking for someone else to listen to, all of those people are going to get ready to talk about their shows right now, and there's links to all of them in the link tree if you'd like to check them out.
Hey there, Afterglow gang. Keith Gasper here, the host of what I'm told is the #1 retro gaming podcast available on the internet, the Main Quest podcast. The Main Quest is an ongoing project wherein I'm replaying the entire library of games that I grew up with, sharing my memories associated with those games, and deciding if that bit of media still holds up today. Every episode I am often, but not always, joined by a friend as we discuss the gameplay, presentation, and most importantly, where that game came from, who took part in its inception, and what kind of legacy it left behind, if any. Because honestly, not every game can be Tetris. It's not enough to walk away from each episode having had fun, but hopefully, you also learned something about your favorite video game, or maybe even a game that you've never even heard of. So come on over, have a listen to the extensive backlog of Main Quest podcast, available of course on all major podcasting platforms, and look out for brand new episodes coming in 2025. And of course, hey, always remember, it's okay to like a video game.
Hello, my name is Aaron. I'm one half of Superpod Saga, a topical variety video game podcast fueled entirely by nostalgia and unleaded gasoline. Superpod Saga, we discuss a different video game topic each and every week. We have new episodes every single Monday covering a different video game topic. More than anything, we want to entertain our listeners and make you feel like you're one of the boys, like you're hanging out at a campfire with some of your best zany, caffeine-powered buddies and just talking about your favorite games and all that stuff. Stop on down to Superpod Saga. It's on every podcatcher there is. If it's not, let me know and we'll get on it. But again, Superpod Saga, stop on by.
Hey, this is Toby, one half of the Secret Levels podcast. We're a podcast that goes over old retro games. We go over the history, the story, the gameplay, some fun facts. We even rage a little bit. And then we go and give it a nice 1 to 10 rating to let you know if it's still worth playing. We have over 200 reviews for games on the NES, the Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, and many other consoles. You can find us on all the major podcasting apps, such as Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and you can follow us on social media at Secret Levels Pod. Game over, folks.
For more than 15 years, Retro Gaming Roundup has been the centre of your retro gaming universe, with top 10s, interviews, game reviews, news, and much more from all over the globe. Be sure to tune in every month for a new dose of Retro Gaming Roundup. That's RetroGamingRoundup.com.
Hello and welcome to the Reviews Brothers. It's me, Martin, and you can join me on YouTube where I have hundreds of videos covering a huge range of video game topics. I've got top 10s, hidden gems, console-focused A to Zs, as well as dedicated videos to topics like Doom mods, 3D platform games, ninja games, pirate games, and more. I cover all systems from Commodore 64 right up to modern consoles. Nothing gaming is off the table. So be sure to search for the Reviews Brothers on YouTube, as well as on Instagram and TikTok for hundreds of retro and modern video game reviews.